for inviting me to say a few remarks. Thank you for that introduction. I value very much the work that indigent defense attorneys perform across our state. I've held court in about half the counties in our state and had good experiences with the attorneys representing indigent clients, and really do thank you for your work that you perform. I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview of what we're looking at the court. So the AOC really is there to equip and assist the court personnel. So there's about 300 folks in the AOC campus in Raleigh that supports the about 6,500 employees across the state. That's the DAs, the clerks, the judges, and the magistrates and their employees. It's an honor to be serving with Chief Justice Newby. We are getting together his vision for the courts. Early on, what we're looking at, like everyone, is COVID response. His approach to COVID is to allow the very capable local officials to make more of the decisions about how to respond to COVID and make decisions about whether or not they should open their courts and to what extent, because he feels that they have better local information. So he allowed Chief Justice Beasley's executive order on COVID, many parts of it to expire, and he issued a new executive order that took effect on January 14th. By and large, we've had positive feedback on that. He also advocated on behalf of the court personnel to have DHHS under Secretary Cohen to prioritize court personnel as frontline essential workers so that they would be given priority access to the vaccine. And I'm happy to report that that was an early example of collaboration with the executive branch, and they did honor that request and have partially granted our request. So an early win for the chief and for the governor there. We have met with OSBM regarding budget. Two items there. First is COVID response. We are trying to get all of the temporary employees, there are about 80 across the state, that we had been able to use federal funding to bring in to assist with the COVID response. It's just a tremendous strain on the resources across our courts. And so we are anticipating that we will have a response on that request in the next week or two. We are continuing to invest heavily in technology to assist us with the COVID response, to eliminate as many face-to-face interactions with the general public as possible, and have audio video equipment to allow judges to issue warrants virtually, to have some proceedings handled virtually. And we're hopeful that some of those responses to COVID could have long-lasting innovations that will increase efficiency without sacrificing any quality of the judicial work that we do. Transitioning now into budget items, the monster of a project that we have inherited from our predecessors here is the eCourts initiative. So trying to transform North Carolina from paper to digital, from the 20th century into the 21st century. There's been what appears to be great work done in that regard. We continue to have funding needs, and so we'll be working with the General Assembly to try to secure those funds to keep the project moving forward. And happy to report that we anticipate the first grouping of pilot counties to go live with the case management system and electronic filing this summer in late July. So that will include Wake County and some surrounding counties, and we look forward to that. So it'll be about a 3-year rollout after that, so that we make sure that we bring counties online and are able to support and educate and train folks as that occurs. Those are really the big items, and I was happy to meet last week with Executive Director Pollard and discuss some of her priorities. I look forward to working with her and with you all And if you ever need anything from AOC, please do not hesitate to reach out. And Mr. Jordan, that's really all I was prepared to talk about. Did you have any questions for me or anything else I can assist with at this time?
Well, I want to thank you for joining us and know that you have an open invitation. And I will tell everyone that we did extend an invitation to Judge Newby today, but he had some other commitments he had to attend to, but he did ask for our future meetings and is hopeful that he will be able to attend those as well. So we appreciate you coming, Judge Heath. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to address at this point in time, Judge Heath? Judge Heath, do you have any other further comments you want to make?
If anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right.
Otherwise, just know that Justice Newby is in a retreat with the other Supreme Court justices, and I will certainly pass along your very gracious invitation to future meetings, and we'll try to make that happen.
All right. Well, thank you, Judge Heath. You're welcome to join as long as you can stand us. But no, we're a hard-working commission, and we have the best intentions at heart, and we appreciate your support.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jordan, and look forward to working with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The next matter on the agenda is a call for volunteers, and I wanted to just let you know that, and I just put this on the chat, kind of went a little quick. The North Carolina High School Mock Trial Competition will be virtual this year, and it is on Friday, February the 5th and Saturday, February the 6th. There's a call out for judges and jurors, and you are asked to consider going to www.ncmocktrial.org, and there's a place for judges and jurors. You can sign up, and the beauty of it is you have to travel nowhere. Last year you would have to go to Wilmington or to Salisbury or to Raleigh or somewhere. This year you can do it from the comforts of your lazy boy at home. So I would ask you to reach out to not only you seek to help out, but reach out to any colleagues that you have. They take paralegals as well as lawyers to assist. So it's something that I was involved in for several years in Salisbury, and something that I think is a worthwhile event. So I'm going to recognize Mary Pollard for the director's report on IDS business. And let me just tell you, we're trying to move through this agenda. We're trying to be as complete as we can be, but we have a deadline of about 1 o'clock because we have a meeting with some of the legislators here in Morganton, and that's why Mary and I are here today. So just take that into account as we move through this agenda. Mary?
Well, thank you, Darren, and good morning, everybody. I will be brief because we have a packed agenda. I wanted to update you quickly on 2 initiatives that I mentioned at our last meeting. The first is the evaluation of the contract system. Again, we're looking at it to see if it's cost effective, and also to look at key performance indicators and client service. Margaret Gressens is working hard on that, and we are on target, Margaret, right, to report back to you at the April meeting. The other initiative I mentioned at the last meeting is proposing changes to the Chief Public Defender Selection Statute. As you know, it requires a number of technical changes that we couldn't make happen last session because of COVID. I mentioned to you when I interviewed for this job that I believe in local selection of chiefs, but that IDS should perhaps have some ability to have some say over the retention decision to protect good incumbents, or in case of problems. So Susan Brooks has been doing some research on practices in other states, and we've invited the Sixth Amendment Center, which is a nonpartisan think tank that studies right to counsel, to present on this topic at the next meeting. They have their own perspective on best practices, but we thought we could hear from them and then have a fuller discussion with the commission down the road. Related to both of these initiatives is the creation of an 8-year plan for IDS. I'm working on a proposal to make that happen. John Rubin has graciously agreed to assist, but we need to be able to have a roadmap we can provide to policymakers at the General Assembly and in the governor's office about where we want to be and how we need to get there. A few more mundane issues that I would like to brief you on. One, real quick, we were offered a 5-year lease renewal for the central office back in February. Before I got here, we ended up renewing for 2 years. Given everything that's going on with the pandemic and the market, that seemed a more prudent decision. Before we renew again, we're going to look real hard at whether the space suits our present needs and whether downtown Durham is still the best value for the state of North Carolina. The website, our IDS website redesign is underway, and we have a target date of March 1. Jeff Connolly and Tucker have been working real hard on this, along with some other folks, and we have a target date of March 1 for the launch, although we'll probably still be working on some bits and pieces after that, but we really want to make it usable and searchable for folks who come to the website. And finally, I held a bunch of town hall meetings online with contracting attorneys, which were really helpful and informative, and Susan Brooks is going to set up the same sort of town hall lunches with the various public defender offices. Since I can't get out, haven't been able to get out into the field because of COVID, it seems like the next best thing, although I'm hopeful I'll be out there in person real soon. So that's all I have by way of my director's report, Darren.
Okay. Any questions of Mary with regards to any of those issues that she is tackling? Just when Mary thought she could take a breath, it seems to always kind of keep rolling down the hill. So, all right. I want to recognize Kate Finhagen has joined us, one of our commissioners. Kate, could you introduce yourself quickly?
I am Kate Finhagen. I'm the director of the Criminal Justice Resource Department here in Orange County, and I apologize for being late. I had another meeting that required me to attend from 10 to 10:30, so apologize.
All right, we're just glad you're here. And who appointed you to the commission, Kate?
I think I'm the IDS appointee.
Okay, the commission, yes. Okay, all right, thank you, Kate. Thank you for joining us. I want to recognize Mary to introduce Dolly Whiteside to us.
Thank you, Darren. So yeah, as you know, back when we used to have live meetings, we'd have a report from the offices at the end of the meeting, and we've gone to written reports, but I do want to make sure that all of the offices and all of the state defenders do have a chance to speak with you. So we're going to rotate folks through at our various meetings. And today, because I think we have a number of new commissioners, a number of people who have never met Dolly Whiteside, I asked Dolly to come and talk about the Office of Special Counsel. To introduce Dolly, because some of you have never met her, Dolly graduated from the Madeira School in 1972, the University of California at Berkeley in 1975, and the UNC School of Law in 1978. And as she says, she has been fortunate enough to have spent her entire career working with others, advocating for and serving clients, navigating the civil commitment legal process. They originally volunteered for Wake County Legal Aid, handling client intake at Dorothea Dix. In January 1979, she was appointed by Senior Resident Superior Court Judge James P. Bailey as special counsel at Dorothea Dix Hospital. In 1992, she joined the AOC staff as an administrator for the Special Counsel program statewide, also working on other indigent defense issues. In 2006, she officially became an IDS employee, administering the statewide Special Counsel program, and to serve as a resource to public defenders and private attorneys representing clients at civil commitment proceedings across the state. And in July 2018, she was appointed as Chief Special Counsel by the IDS Commission. So Dolly, welcome, and thank you for agreeing to come and talk to us about your important work.
Thank you, Mary, and good morning to everybody. I'm also going to try to keep things brief given the big agenda today. We'll call this Special Counsel and Commitments 101 maybe, and then sometime from now we'll revisit. I want to go back real fast in history to the mid-1970s, which is when the North Carolina General Assembly established the entire procedure, which is housed in Chapter 122C of the statutes, setting up commitment hearings across the state of North Carolina. There are many things about that original statutory scheme that are the same today, but the important things were that it provided really good due process procedures for the hearings. Folks facing commitment are entitled to a hearing within 10 days. It's in front of a district court judge. They get appointed counsel. They have the right to cross-examine and confront witnesses. We can just, go from there. The other thing it did was establish the 4 offices of special counsel across the state, one of each of the psychiatric hospitals. So that was Cherry Hospital, Broughton. Now we have Central Regional, and at the time we have Dorothea Dix. So that's when our special counsel group started. They were all appointed by the senior residents. They were AOC employees. And now we'll fast forward. A lot of you know that about 10, 12 years ago, Dix went through a phase down and closed out. So we now have 3 state hospitals with special counsels and support staff. But the Raleigh staff, who were the Dix employees, still survive to this day. And they serve 4 hospitals in Wake County and have the bulk of the caseload for the special counsel program. So as part of IDS, we now have 8 attorneys, about 7 support staff positions. And the attorneys in that program last year disposed almost 15,000 cases. Those are dispositions. This is a very high volume area. Things that have changed, and I'll be brief about this. We now have our 3 state hospitals filled to a very large degree with individuals who also have criminal charges and have found incapable to proceed. We refer to those sometimes as our ITP clients. So we work a lot now with criminal attorneys about their folks who have criminal charges. And we have seen across the state just the proliferation of many small treatment facilities across the state. So attorneys now, other than special counsel, represent people in private hospitals that serve special populations like geriatric clients or only minors. And the whole landscape has changed dramatically about where commitment hearings are held and how many facilities there are. So there's now kind of a panoply. There's our special counsel program in IDS, but there are assistant public defenders and PD offices handling commitments. Buncombe, Mecklenburg, Durham come to mind right away. We also have 2 commitment contracts with private appointed counsel, a big one in Forsyth, a small one in Gaston. We have many attorneys on appointment lists in non-PD districts, some on appointment lists in PD districts. So kind of our special counsel family, I think of now, is our special counsel staff, but also assistant public defenders and private appointed counsel. So I really see part of our mission is in serving all those attorneys and helping them represent our very deserving clients. We have a big CLE coming up next week that school government helps us with every 2 years. We do a lot of advising of attorneys in the field about how to best represent their clients. And that is how we are functioning at this time. I want to give a huge shout out to all the lawyers, whether it's our special counsel employees or PAC attorneys or assistant PDs, for continuing to go on during the time of COVID. Commitment court happens 52 weeks a year. We do not get to stop. We are like, I guess, first appearances, secure custody hearings. We always have commitment court. We've had a lot of lawyers going in, continuing to see clients in person throughout the pandemic, totally PPE'd up, but working in facilities where there are significant numbers of active COVID cases and attorneys exposed, being exposed. We've also worked with folks all over the state about setting up remote hearings, remote interviews, all the different things people have come up with to try to make it through the pandemic. I think we're all really looking forward to when we can get back to working with our clients in person, like all the way around, from the interview to the hearing and everything else that happens. And last, just for folks to know, I think, like, who our clients are. Our clients are everybody. We represent little children. We have children facing civil commitment who are, I in the past had clients as young as 5. We have the whole age band going up to geriatric clients. We have folks who are facing Alzheimer's and other dementia. We have clients who are fighting active psychosis all through their lives. We have clients we've known for decades and watched them try to navigate the system. And I think that, like, the last thing I would wrap up to say about our clients, who I think we all really respect and love, is that part of their having to deal with the commitment system and facing hospitalization and rehospitalization is so connected to lack of other services, lack of housing, lack of transportation, lack of food. We have many homeless clients. So our folks, even though while they're struggling with mental health issues also, or substance abuse issues, they are facing all those challenges that indigent clients have everywhere and poor people everywhere have. So I think that's it. Thank you, Mary. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Dolly.
Dolly. Thank you, Dolly.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Dolly, of the folks that you represent who are facing capacity to proceed, roughly speaking, what's the percentage of misdemeanor versus felony?
Ooh, Staples, you're going to ask me the one question I probably can't just answer like that.
Yes.
You know, just to be tough, Staples, I knew it would be you. I would say, I can't give you percentages, but I will say that at the state hospitals, for the folks with felony charges and the more serious, you know, murder charges and serious felonies, a lot of those folks stay in the hospital a very long time, some of them decades. For folks coming in on misdemeanor, it's probably less frequent now, knock on wood saying that, and they are more likely to move through the system faster. Although I will add one thing, with the courts, the shutdown or partial shutdown that we've seen with COVID, we have folks now in the state hospitals who are capable to proceed and ready to go back to trial, whether or not everybody thinks that's a good idea, but who can't move out because they can't get their cases docketed and they're in the gridlock that other people are on the criminal side. So you got more than you asked for, but not the answer to your real question. Thank you, Staples.
No, it gives me a sense of what I wanted to know. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Is there any more questions of Dolly? I just noted in the chat box, Tucker and Whitney indicated that she is available for consults in our cases, which is nice to know, and something we need to highlight. So thank you, Dolly, for that report. Does anybody else have any other questions? We recognize the other defenders that are on the call just for purposes of, you should have their reports in the packet. I hope you've had a chance to read them. I want to first just recognize Rob Sharp is on the call, who is the capital defender. Rob, didn't see a report, but I do know that he had a letter of the accomplishments of his first term, and I would just submit that as being sort of his report of the year 2020 and for the time that he was there. Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Sharp? All right, not seeing anybody want to talk to Mr. Sharp at all. I would recognize, I think Eric Zagrai is on the call today. Eric, he has a report of his 2020 year-end review hope you've had a chance to read that. Does anybody have any questions of Eric about his report or that office? All right. And finally, you have a report from the regional defenders, which is always really, really helpful. And I appreciate them putting that together. And I believe Tucker is on the call. And I want to ask if anybody has any questions of Tucker at this point in time about her report. All right, seeing none. I want to welcome and recognize Commissioner Channing Jones. Channing, would you just introduce yourself? Let us know where you are and how you were appointed to the commission.
Thanks, Chairman. My name's Channing Jones. I'm in Robeson County. I was appointed by the IDS Commission. Hope everybody's starting off 2021 great and safe, most importantly. Glad to be here.
All right, thank you, Channing. We'll move into our fiscal report, and I would, Mary, do you want to let Alicia take off on this, or would you like to say something in the beginning?
We'll have Elisa take the lead on this.
All right.
I'm in as needed. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. In the supplemental packet that you got yesterday, there's a very brief handout. And I will be brief because there's not as much detailed stuff to say about our budget as there sometimes is. Usually at this point in the year, we're crafting both requests for expansion, both from the governor's office and then on to the legislature, but also looking at long-range forecasts of the private assigned counsel fund, anticipating growth or changes and where they will be. And so that there'd be a more detailed analysis of the trends and very specific areas and other things. And we're still in a situation where there's nothing to analyze. There's no good data to analyze that can predict the future. But just a real quick overview, pre-pandemic, I considered our private assigned counsel spending relatively stable. It wasn't swinging around and pretty close to fully funded at the rates we had and the volume of work we had. We were hitting even most years. Our funding for private assigned counsel comes mostly from the state appropriation, and then about 10 million from recoupment from our clients, either contemporaneous through the clerks and then through judgments in the set-off debt program. And then we've always made sure that we had funds available in our other parts of the IDS budget to move into the PAC fund. It's always been assumed that part of the PAC fund spending was funded by watching spending in our public defender and IDS administration. There's a certain amount of lapsed salary, unspent salary money that would happen anyway, but we actually put a cap on how much the local public defenders and the special defenders can use of their salary funds in order to make sure there is lapsed salary. So those are where the things have come from. Looking at this year, of course, our spending is much lower than it has been. Usually by now, I've always found December's a pretty good predictor of the rest of the year. Once I know what's gone through December, I've usually been able to say what the year end will be, but of course I can't. But I do know that, we're at the end of January. We got almost no mail in January. So our spending by the end of January, apparently the state's mail service center's been closed all week was part of that, but some of it's reflecting court closures and clerk's offices closures. But that, once we get to the end of January, the amount to which we've spent less than prior years, nothing's going to happen in the next 5 months to take away that savings. And so, it'd be very hard to convince me I have anything to worry about not having enough funds through the rest of the year for private assigned counsel without taking any extra efforts. The only risk would be if the Office of State Budget had a statewide budget crisis and needed to take back some of our funds, but I hear nothing to suggest that's a possibility. A lot because of tax revenue shifted from last year to this year. There just doesn't seem, although people are hurting in the state budget does not appear to be in trouble. So that I think is the only risk. Of course, our recoupment receipts are down along with our spending. And of course, we have no idea what set-off debt will bring in a given year. We will start getting that money for the new year in late February. And then the big amounts will come in just a very short period in probably in March and maybe into April. So until that happens, we can't predict that because there's no way to model that. But there isn't any reason to think this year would be different than past years. That's also been a relatively stable and slightly increasing revenue source with its own issues. And of course, there was a new fee introduced this year in the very short, very limited budget session. There was a fee that had been in the budget the prior year that had been vetoed, where there's a $2 court of justice fee that was started collections December 1st. First time any of our receipt money has come from non-clients. I mean, some of those are clients, but court of justice fee is on anyone who's in the court system. It's brought in, I don't know, about $50,000 so far. And then there was the increase in the appointment fee from $60 to $75. And that will be very slow. I don't project very much new revenue from that this year because actually a substantial portion of our appointment fee comes through set-off debt. And the increase starting December 1st won't affect our set-off judgments from prior cases. So if you look at our budget compared to last year, there's actually more revenue projected because of those new receipts. So to figure out the rest of the year, all I can do is say, what's the second half of the year look like in most years? And that's where I get my sort of high cost and low cost things. If the rest of the year was like 2019, which was our last normal year, then we would finish relatively even. I consider a 1 million thing is almost, that can swing in a week. And so it's really pretty even. We would be unlikely to run out of money, but not have a lot left over at the end of the year. If I'm looking at having $1 million left at the end of the year, I can usually figure out a way to think about the timing of different things that even that out. If instead the rest of the year is like last year's second half of the year, where we had two or three busy months and then almost complete shutdown for most of the rest of the year. We don't have either of those, probably this year, either really busy or total shutdown. I think it's going to be in between. But if the rest of the year was like last year, we could have almost $5 million left at the end of the year. And so, I was thinking, Darren's laughing. It's Darren laughing. So that's I can't promise that, but it seemed a good thing. I would not be doing my job if I came back in June and said, oh yeah, we had $5 million left that reverted. That it seems a good thing to alert. And I think everybody recognizes the very limited extent I can predict what's going to happen. There's a couple of things that could happen if we have money left at the end of the year. If you don't spend all your budget, it reverts to the state general fund. And one of the reasons that the state doesn't have a budget crisis now is because agencies revert. Apparently, Department of Public Instruction and Departments of Health and Human Services revert tons of money every year. And that's why there's a fund balance that kept the state afloat. So that it's not like it goes to waste, it goes to a purpose. There's also a provision that allows us to transfer unencumbered funds at the end of the year to the AOC Tech Fund for their e-courts initiative. I'm not sure if I would say those provision says we should or we could. It's probably something we need to look at more closely. We have done very small amounts of money in past years, like tens of 10,000 or something like that. But that is another potential use. And it's also the kind of thing that we don't have to that doesn't happen until all the dust has settled really in early July when the old year is still open. But that is obviously, if something was going to happen, I think we'd want to think about how to leverage that in terms of cooperation and things that might help us out of the e-courts initiative, because that would be a big transfer to that. There are special projects that we can do. Mary's talking about doing an 8-year comprehensive plan. I mean, so things like contracts to fix our website and things like that sort are not a problem this year. They're things that we can think about doing, but they're not of the magnitude that we're talking about here. One of my pet things is when we open new public defender offices, it's a hit on our current year budget because we're still paying all those fee applications for attorneys who have been already appointed and not yet resolved cases. And when you open a new PD's offices, old fee apps tend to come out of the woodwork. And in addition, you're paying the cost of a new office before they're really diverting work from the private assigned counsel. So this would have been an awesome year to open new public defender offices because we have the current year availability to cover those transitional costs. Historically, new public defender offices show up in the budget at the end of the year. So the availability this year would be irrelevant at that point. But I'm not sure that it's has to be that way, that it isn't possible to have standalone bills that open new public defender offices. If they're not appropriating new money to us, it should not have to be in the budget. I'm not, there might be different opinions on that among the legislative legal staff, but I think that is certainly something to think about, just that it's just sort of an appropriate use of those funds this year. So those are the basic possibilities of what might happen or what we could hope to have happen. And then we're going to talk a little bit later. The other thing is to do targeted rate increases. The money, having $5 million left over this year would not mean that we have $5 million extra next year. And so raising rates is a recurring cost. So it would have to be very targeted. It'd have to be an amount that we would be comfortable risking carrying over into future years. And so that's why we're talking about that a little later. And then just sort of general, just to get a feel of it, we've spent less than we would have by now in prior years. And how does that mix look compared to other years? And one of the reasons our spending is as close to what it was in prior years as it is because a substantial amount of our work is done by contracts. We have 2 large contracts with organizations, Prisoners Legal Services and Center for Children's Rights. We have the RFP adult criminal contracts. We have the parent rep contracts. We have the juvenile delinquency contracts, and then a lot of smaller volume contracts for lots of different things. And those contract payments, of course, were the same every month as they would have been regardless of the level of court activity due to the pandemic. And so, of course, the share of our total spending that's been contracts has been higher. The share that dropped, of course, was capital trial spending, because there hasn't been a capital trial since February or early March, in Superior Court. District Court is not that different from prior years in terms of its share of our total spending, but I think there's been a shift within District Court. So that just sort of tells how what's been being paid out this year differs from prior years. So I think that's about all I have to say about this year between now and June.
Does anybody have any questions of Alicia? Alicia, I was smiling because I thought we needed to get you a magic 8-ball next year so that you could give us more clarity on what's going on.
Yeah.
We're going to get you a magic 8-ball. So that way you could shake it. You could tell us this is definitely going to happen or not.
And we're
Some of these folks probably don't know what a magic 8-ball is, but we grew up with them, right?
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Mary, do you want to be heard about the fiscal?
I don't, not at this point. I'll have some things to say, I think, when we get to the rate hike discussion. Elisa, do you want to, so as to the 2022 fiscal year budget request, Elisa has been working really hard on the budget request to the governors, the OSBM. Elisa and Darren and I met with the folks from that office, I think on the 30th of December, and made our pitch for restoring PAC funding and a whole bunch of other things. Elisa, you can go ahead and.
And this was in the original packet that I think went out on Monday. But we have, in the way their procedure works, and I just think it's fair to say, having a recommendation in the governor's budget doesn't necessarily mean you get any money. But we've always treated the process with a lot of care because, the more friends you have, the better. And it's also sort of a dry run for making our case to the legislature. And the more they know about our needs, even if it isn't included in a budget, they can help out sometimes in little ways when there's they need to know, where the pain points are in the state budget, even if they can't make the legislature appropriate money. It's sort of important. So in their processes, every agency gets their audience with the state budget director and his top staff early in the process. Then you sort of submit a list. Sometimes they'll say, okay, we like your list, but we really only like 4 of the 7 items. This year they said, we gave them a list of, I think, 7 items, and they said, go ahead and submit the detailed version. They're sort of like mini grant proposals on all of them. And so that's what we're working on. I'm just sort of finishing up this afternoon. And they ask us to do it in priority and match it with things that we've said are in a strategic plan and talk about how we're going to evaluate it and other issues. And so what the proposals we've floated with them and are going to submit on paper, like last year, the top priority is what we've been calling meaningful rate restoration. And we have a $17 million figure we developed a couple of years ago and haven't updated, but we've always sort of maintained, we're not saying exactly where that 17 million would go, but we know that based on the analysis we've done, it would bring most of the rates to what they were in 2011, not accounting for inflation. So we call it meaningful, but it's certainly not overwhelming. And so that's our top priority. They've always recommended some of that in their budget. They expressed regret that they hadn't been able to recommend more in the past. And so, it's a big number, but they understand it's our top priority. The second priority we submitted is a little different. We had for many years when we needed a new position in appellate defender or in Wake County Public Defender's Office, we could take money from the private assigned counsel fund and shift it over to create a position on the idea that we were shifting work. And because that's how we manage our budget, where's the money needed? We lost that flexibility a number of years ago. So I thought, well, this year, rather than we'll ask for it again. Rather than ask for it again, we'll say, okay, all these years we've been saying we'd create these positions for free, and you didn't seem to want us to do it for free. So instead, we'll ask for money. And so we went to our specialized defender offices, which are really feeling, I know we have the workload study showing the problems in the local public defender programs, but we hadn't addressed some very targeted, very specific needs in those specialized defender programs where the use of PAC is more problematic. Just having heard Dolly's presentation on civil commitment, you just can't take anybody right out of law school and say, yeah, we're going to send you to do civil commitment or a capital case or write an appeal. And so this is a request for new positions in those offices based on expanded caseload in the Capital Defender's Office, where, you heard last meeting about having to up the recommended caseload cap, adding a paralegal in the Robinson office, which has grown considerably since it was part of our efforts to more satellite the Capital Defender, and then a position in the Office of Special Counsel in Wake County, and then 2 assistant appellate defenders. Glenn has some good data on the sort of shrinkage of the size of the roster there, as does Rob. And so that's our second priority request. My guess is that request gets to the legislature and maybe we'll get the flexibility back. They'll suddenly realize that, they were going to do it for free. It's not free here. So if that's I think it'd be great to get the money, but if we got the flexibility, I'll feel like the strategy was a good one. And the third item is a sort of 2-part item that has to do with, and Mary probably can talk to this more eloquently, the idea that it's time to recognize that in terms of quality and the fact that we're never going to have good rates for PAC, even if we get 17 million, they're really still not very good, that a statewide defender program of some sort is a direction. And so this would do two things, which would be help fund a plan, which Mary talked about already some. We don't necessarily need a lot of money in next year's budget too. We might be able to do that with this year's budget, but it's just sort of a good way to package the idea. And then this other idea that, okay, we know there's a lot of interest in moving in that direction. We have 4, 5, 6 very active proposals for new or expanded public defender programs where there's already local buy-in, where there's already legislative support. Whitney went to a meeting in Pender County a year ago with everybody there, and they were about ready to do that. And so it's extending District 5 into Pender, where it should have been all along, splitting Districts 1 and 2 in the proposed Cleveland-Lincoln Public Defender's Office, where I'm convinced the county's already built the offices. And so those are in the chute, go ahead and do them. And then again, as a departure from, we fund new public defenders just by taking money out of the PAC. This recognizes that there's some short-term costs, the setup costs and the transitional costs, in that a public defenders program is going to cost more than the PAC did because of the PAC rates. And so that it also asks for sort of a recurring cushion to say, we're increasing the total cost of defense by taking this move and all that. So it's a relatively modest amount, but it sort of does those two things. The other items are just like last year, asking to fund the first phase of the workload of the positions, identifying the workload study for local public defender programs for existing offices, existing caseload, and then adding a regional defender, again, as part of a long-term initiative and recognition that that's an important piece of our quality initiative, and that along packaged with the request for a regional defender, a third regional defender, is an additional contracts administrator. We decided to package those two together in ways. And then the last item, and that changed a little bit from the version that was in your Monday's packet. And the last item is to ask for ability to work towards our IT strategic plan. That I think Mary, coming in from outside and seeing how things are done, has really recognized that we've been hampered in a lot of ways by not having staff and funds to do meaningful IT improvements, and the fact that everything is locked down in the judicial system until e-courts is done doesn't make that any easier. So this would actually ask for a position to oversee those kinds of things, some of which could be outsourced, but unless you have somebody in charge who knows IT, it's dangerous, to outsource. And so that's sort of the last request. So I think I covered everything. And then the next step is for us to take the way we've developed these proposals and costed out these proposals and turn it into pieces to bring to legislature. And that's one of the reasons that we do this big push for the state budget process, because then we have the building blocks for that. That's all.
Thank you.
All right. Let me, Mary, before you go, I know that you may have to get off the call. Did you want to ask her this question that you posted in the group chat?
She can read it.
So I think I addressed about the fourth quarter. That's what I think that's what we're talking about, and that's is that if we haven't spent it, well, I think I just laid out the options. I mean, we could proactively say we want it to go to e-courts. It'll probably be a three-way discussion if there's really a balance at the end of the year between AOC, state budget, and e-courts. Last year, they discouraged us from transferring a balance to e-courts. And they wanted us to carry it over for ourselves instead. So, it's sort of a three-way thing. Or talk now about things we can do that will mean we'll take advantage of the fact that we're not tight. the end of the year. I don't want to make it sound like we're trying to spend money. It's like, oh, this is a year where we don't have to worry about doing a few extra things.
I
What
just
about
asked
Dorothy's
a
question?
Dan.
I'm sorry, Art, you got a follow-up?
I just asked a question from the standpoint of my administrator's hat, which I wore for many, many years. And that is to have stuff ready to go. So when they said, okay, you got the ability to spend X amount of dollars, you could push a button that same day and say, okay, here's our first priority, here's our second priority, and here's our third priority, and get it into the mix. Because over the years, and I don't know how it works in the state government or state budget office, but over the series of years that I was an administrator, if I didn't have it ready the day they asked for it, I lost it.
Yeah, we tend not to have high dollar things that aren't recurring. And this is a non-recurring availability. So it's just,
We do have a project wish list that we may or may not be able to use some of these funds for, as I understand it. One is this funding for a consultant to work with us on this 8-year plan, because it's complicated. It's got a lot of pieces, you know, trends and demography and costs and budget. And the other would be doing some consulting with a high-level IT person to try to get a handle on our current and future technology needs. And then the third thing is because we're feeling a little bit sanguine about the budget, this year's budget. And we were going to talk about this during, I guess, the discussion of the legislative session, but, you know, to the extent that we believe that the proposed public defender expansions in Pender County and Cleveland and Lincoln and splitting District 1 and 2 are good and wise, and I do. I think we've known that for a while. It wouldn't be a bad year for that to happen in a standalone bill, because we could absorb some of those costs in a way that we might not be able to otherwise. So I feel there are different ways we can spend the money. If it's
I have a question, and that is, what is the current realistic thinking about a functioning e-courts system completion date?
I mean, Judge Heath sounded a little bit more optimistic than we had heard before. We had heard up to 5 years, and I think he just told us 3. I think they're going all in, and maybe they are out there looking for more funding to speed up the process. I don't know. Time will tell.
And I have just one thing to add, and I don't know what the fiscal impact of this is, but there is an enormous backlog, of course, in the public defender offices. And I've heard it articulated more than once in the PD meetings. Unfortunately, I missed the last one, so maybe there's updated information, but there's a huge backlog in the offices. I know that doesn't exert a direct fiscal pressure, except, you know, people resigning because they're for mental health reasons or something. But it's just something that I think we need to be aware of.
Dorothy, did you want to ask?
Dorothy's question?
I'm still.
Yes, please.
And that's, I think it was a year ago or a little over a year ago that staff brought a proposal about bonuses. I think it must have been 2 years ago, because last year we would have been more worried about money. I think maybe 2 years ago we anticipated having some small amounts of money. And so the commission has reviewed that before, but that is certainly, it's not something that can't be done. I know that was a double negative, but yes, that is a possible way to look. The other thing we tossed around last year when the pandemic first started was we're doing sort of, I guess, sort of like the federal what do they call them, payroll protection loans, to small businesses to try to bridge them over the lack of income during the pandemic, whether there was a way to do short-term contracts, because contracts basically prepay attorneys for their work to, cover that time period where there was no money coming in for small practitioners, but they would be able to do work for. All those are very complicated to implement, but they are the kinds of things that can use short-term, take advantage of short-term money.
I thought it would be good to look at that again, especially for those matters in which there are no increases that are coming down the pipe for those. Like we saw, we have in our included there the $5 increase here and the $5 increase there. And especially for those folks that won't see it at all unless they get something like this. And it's always better to use what we have instead of having to give it back. So
We can pull out what we presented whenever it was. And that was just, one version of a lot of possible ways to look at it.
thank you for that. I would love to look at that again.
We'll presumably have a better idea in April than we do today of where we'll be at the end of the year.
Yeah. And something like bonuses could be done in May or June.
I'm just saying that for a discussion at the next commission meeting, we'll have a better idea whether it's going to be closer to the 1 million or closer to the 5 million at the next meeting.
And the only other possible thing is it's not impossible to carry forward funds from one year to the next. But the legislature has steadily reduced the sort of flexibility that OSBM has in deciding when and when not to do that. So it has to be very particular. And this issue of, is there an enormous pending backlog of cases that are going to hit the system next year or the year after? We wouldn't have any data to point to today to show that. It doesn't show up in the data. We think it's there, but I don't think anybody has any data that says there's a big backlog of cases that are going to flood the court system. But that might change. I just think that the way data's been collected doesn't reflect that, just like Staples was talking about the PD offices. And so if between now and June, we are able to document that, say, oh yeah, we have this money left because we didn't have the work in fiscal year 21, but it's coming. That's almost like an encumbrance, which is one of the ways to do it. And so it would certainly be something to discuss. But today I wouldn't be able to do that discussion. I wouldn't be able to, it's theoretical. And so that's another thing for us to keep in mind as strategies.
I guess, are there any more questions about the expansion request or the current budget before we turn to the discussion of targeted rate increases?
Let's go ahead and get that.
Okay, so in the supplemental materials yesterday, there was a memo proposing that you all consider certain targeted rate increases that could be effective as soon as March 1st. It's, this is a difficult discussion. We're comfortable that Elise and I are both comfortable recommending that you make a decision to spend some of this money that's coming in from these new, the appointment fee and the what is the $2 fee?
Court of Justice.
The $2 Court of Justice fee. They raised those fees to give us that money. The legislature did with the expectation, I assume, that we would use it and that we would use it to raise rates, which we desperately need to do. There's some issues with this. One is it's far from enough to do everything we want to do, right? It's a little teeny tiny amount in the big picture. If we do targeted rate increases, the people who are not targeted and don't get a rate increase are maybe unhappy. But it is something. It is something. So in your materials, we kind of gave you a table and a proposal, and we can talk about whether that makes sense and whether you all want to make changes to it. I want to say, so we came to this. First of all, it doesn't suggest raising rates for parent representation, and the reason for that is that we're hopeful that we can do something with the 4E money that will be coming in. So we kind of didn't focus on that for that group of people. We had a meeting with the state defenders and the regional defenders and kind of talked about where the needs are greatest, and the needs are greatest everywhere. But the proposal we came up with seem not entirely arbitrary in that it addresses high-level felony rates. There's a tremendous difficulty in a lot of counties finding lawyers to take high-level felony work. That's when I get phone calls from judges, that's what it's about. I think Tucker and Sampson County, is this right? There's only one person doing high-level felony work. So that would help, perhaps help recruit and retain lawyers who are doing high-level felony work. Of course, if we need to, if we raise those rates, we would need to raise the appellate rate for folks who do high-level felony appeals. So that would be a little chunk of money there. You know, the capital trial, all of that money needs to go up, right? But $5 isn't going to get it anywhere close to, for example, the federal rate or even where it needs to be. And we're going to fight pretty hard, I think, for targeted expansion of positions in Rob's office. So that would help the capital bar some or our client issues by giving him staff. But this proposal would help his folks some in that if when a case is declared non-capital, and most of them are, they wouldn't drop to $75 an hour, they would only drop to $80 an hour. We've proposed raising DWI because Elisa thinks that makes sense from an accounting standpoint because they flip back and forth from district court to superior court. So we would propose raising DWI by $5 to $60 an hour, and A1 misdemeanors, which are the most serious, where people are most likely to be suffering serious consequences, to $60 an hour. And the cost of those combined would be just over $1 million. And we would be comfortable with kind of that ballpark with the money that's expected to come in. We don't want to go too large because not all the money may come in. Now, since we put all this together for you, a couple of things do give me pause, and I do want to raise them today. I spoke with Tucker yesterday, or emailed back and forth anyway, or texted, or had some communication. And this proposal excludes the contracts. And, the thinking there was, or my thinking was, well, we can deal with that at contract renewal, and people enter into contracts and it's for 12 months or 24 months, and they kind of know what they're getting into, and they have these benefits and these drawbacks. But Tucker says that historically it's been represented to the contract attorneys that if the PAC rates were raised, they would get something as well, which I was not aware of when we kind of talked about doing this. So it does give me a bit of pause to exclude the contracts. If we include the contracts, the total cost goes up to almost 1.3 million, and I'm not sure I'm comfortable going that big. So I'll turn it over to Elisa, who can probably be more articulate about all that than I can, and then maybe we can open it up for discussion.
And then there has been a lot of thought about the contract piece in the last 18 hours or whatever, but also I feel like I had sort of given Mary one set of numbers and then said, oh yeah, but then we add in the contracts, it's another. So I don't know if it's like, I raised the price tag after she fell in love with the house. But also, one of the reasons I was slow to do that is it is complicated to figure out it's not as easy to figure out the impact on contracts as it is on the hourly rate. And in the hourly rate ones are projections as well too, because the volume changes from year to year. But I do know the number that I have here is too high, that I looked back at the number I had used in past years. And actually sometimes it was this high and sometimes it wasn't. Then I looked at what it actually cost. The last time we raised the high level felony rate was in 2017. And we didn't do the contracts right away. There was some delay, but we did extend that to contracts. I think we did it at renewal, or it was something to do with when the different waves were. But then I looked at what the actual cost was on the contracts by what we actually paid, and it was nowhere near the magnitude I have here for a $5 rate increase. So I think the true number is about $100,000 less. So that with contracts, we might be talking about 1.2, not 1.3.
Do we need to maybe table this and kind of go back and look at the numbers and let y'all create a new possibility or a new couple of alternatives?
Well, if we have just a little while to talk about kind of your views on it, we could always take it back to the budget committee and come back for a vote. you know, one of the issues is when we were in, and Lisa has the charts here, and we were sort of like, how do we pick one from column A and two from column B and get to the number we need to be at? I know, and I believe that last time you all discussed a possible rate increase or hike, and it didn't come to pass. There was a division of opinion about whether it should be all district court work or high-level felony work. We can't do all district court work, all criminal district, adult criminal district court work, because we just don't have enough money, right? So we kind of ruled that out as a possibility. And then, as I said earlier, we do have the issues with recruitment and retention of people to do the high-level felony work and the potentially capital cases. So we wanted to try to put some money on the table there. We simply don't have enough money to raise low-level felony, right? All low-level felony. It's just not there. So this seemed like the best we could come up with of non-arbitrary pieces that would help. So, yeah.
Brian Jones has got his hand raised. Brian, do you want to be heard? No, you get unmute.
Okay, I got you. Can you hear me? All right. The only thing I wanted to say was that Burke County is in a county where we have flat rate, and the flat rate for an A1 misdemeanor is 200, and the flat rate for a class 1 through 3 misdemeanor is 185. So it reflects that DWIs on the flat rate, and DWIs in class A1s are reimbursed at a higher rate. And I just wanted to make that point.
That's the case in Rowan too. I mean, we pay more for DWIs in Rowan than we do with regular misdemeanor cases. So.
And that was part of our rationale, was that there was already some precedent for treating those differently.
But I think Susan's right. I mean, you know, every time there's been a rate increase, there's been an increase in the flat rates. And I've always considered that was an increase in the contracts too. So, I mean, I understand all that. All right.
If I could,
so, Mary, what's your suggestion right now that we do with this? I mean,
well, Elisa, if what's our comfort level with spending 1.2? Include the contracts.
I am comfortable with that because, you know, in my world, you know, $200,000 isn't very much. You know, in a normal week, that's like 2 days worth of mail or 3 days worth of mail here. So if you're off by 200,000, it doesn't cause much disruption. It's when it snowballs from year to year that's a problem. So no, I don't have to me, $1 million and 1.2 is sort of the same. Like when I talked about, you know, projected end of year this year, when I say, you know, if it's $1 million, it's break even. So yeah, 1 million, 1.2, I think that's not a different risk category for me. But I'm reckless. No, I'm not. I'm not at all. I'm not at all reckless.
Not at all.
Did we include in the commission materials, and I thought it was at the bottom of this memo, maybe I'm overlooking, oh, here it is, okay. The annualized impact of the fees. This was Elisa's notes on the annualized impact of the December 2020 fees. 1.25 from the $2 court of justice fee, 405.6 from the increased appointment fee, annualized $1.6 million, short-term estimate $1.4 million, $1.45 million. In the memo we wrote, with the first set of numbers, I said that we would be comfortable approving targeted rate hikes in an amount that would total somewhere in the range of $750 to $1 million. That was, I think, before Elisa reran all these numbers, and we were looking at a little bit less coming in. So I don't know. If that 1.2, no, I'm sorry, if that 1.4 is a conservative estimate, I would feel much better about spending, you know, you all targeting rate hikes and spending 1.2. if it's not such a conservative estimate, I'm, you know, it's my first year here. I'd rather not jump off the fiscal cliff because I made a bad recommendation to you. But we got to spend the money, and we got to do something for these folks, right? We have to do something for these lawyers. Staples.
Yeah, to the three areas, the three classifications that you've recommended. To what extent is that recommendation driven by the difficulty of recruiting counsel for those? I know you mentioned high-level felonies was a problem. Are the other two likewise problems? It seems to me that that's what ought to drive the decision, is the difficult, you know, if we got, I don't know that $5 an hour is going to make a great deal of difference, but so maybe it's not just a demand thing, but I'm wondering what's the analysis there?
I think the analysis there is that we wanted to include high-level felony because of the difficulty of recruiting counsel, but that people are starving at $55 an hour in district court, and that's where most of the work is. And it's just unfair and terrible to ask them to work for $55 an hour when their overhead is $54 an hour, and we require them to have office space and all that good stuff. And we just want to do what we can for people who are not making any money. And Tucker can speak maybe more eloquently to this, and she might also have a better idea about the, you know, kind of the demand crisis, if there is one in the misdemeanor world. But, you know, we talk to these folks, they don't have health insurance, right? Their kids are on Medicaid, and they're doing work that the state of North Carolina has to have done, right? The Constitution requires it, and we're paying them $55 an hour and they can't live on it. So that's kind of, I thought we should try to do something for some of those folks if we could.
Okay, I have a follow-up, and then I see that Mario is, wants to make a contribution here. So, I mean, if we're talking about your recommendation, I mean, there's the question of whether we recommend that, but does that recommendation at this point, it does not, as stated in the figures that you've presented us, it does not include contractors. Is that correct?
What we sent you yesterday, we did not propose including contractors. What I was comfortable before the last 18 hours, I was going to come in and say, hey, do this $1 million. It's $1,047,000, and it will do these categories, these targeted rate increases. And we're done and we're happy. And I would have been very happy coming in and here and saying, hey guys, you need to spend this $1 million. Then kind of Tucker raised these issues as to the contractors. And you know, that's a historical thing that I don't know, I guess, you know, from my mind, when you enter into a contract, you bargain for something, you know what you're going to get paid for 24 months, and then you renegotiate and you raise the rates when you renegotiate. But I guess historically that's not been how it's been represented. So
and the marginal difference is what?
Is well, Elisa says maybe so. Go ahead, please.
Oh, I would say it's 200,000. And also just to clarify, it's a little bit a question of timing. I mean, I don't think the concept was ever that the contracts wouldn't reflect the higher rates, but that it was a question of timing. The other thing I just want to remind people of is, you know, doing rate increases is not something like you want to do $5 in March, and then another $5 in June, and then another $10 the following June. You know, we have tried to minimize those transitions for a lot of reasons, not because we're lazy, but there's a lot of reasons that's pretty disruptive. And I don't know for sure, but I do believe we're going to get a big chunk of money in the next fiscal year, and that the meaningful rate restoration chart we have aren't $5 increases. They're real increases, because $5 isn't a big increase. It isn't.
I'm sorry, Mario. Lisa, could you talk about the timing issue, what that means?
Well, I think that we thought we would ultimately include I mean, that's why the chart reflects both with and without contracts. It was just if the commission was going to vote today, either to say, yes, proceed with raising these three rates, and then work out when it would apply to contracts, or send it to the budget committee. But I just don't think that we had necessarily thought it would start right at the same moment.
We were proposing a targeted rate increase to start March 1st, and then hope that we would do a significant rate increase after the legislature gives us a ton more money, because they're going to give us more money. We're sure of it.
Yeah.
This is Whitney. I'm sorry. I don't know how to raise my hand, apparently. But I just want to point out that, I mean, I understood that part of the reasons we didn't talk directly about increasing the contractor rates at this moment was that we had a number of buckets of contracts that were in this renewal phase, that they were contracts, and that an increase to the contracts would be implemented as they renewed. And I don't want to burden the commission with staffing discussions right now, but we have some serious staffing issues that affect our ability to do amendments at the moment.
The issue with that is that we extended these contracts for 12 months, so they're not renewing anytime soon.
I'm aware of that issue.
In our standard contract that we base the contracted amount on the private assigned counsel rates, especially when it comes to EP. So if you increase the private assigned counsel rate, you have to increase the contracts and what you pay for EP because it's in the contract.
When the contract renews. Again, no, I don't want to burden the commission with staffing issues.
We base the rate off the private assigned counsel rate.
Well, Mario, I would agree with Whitney that would be at renewal time. I don't read the contract to require an interim bump, but there are human issues, and if they believe they were going to get an interim bump and all of that, we certainly could do a bump with the extraordinary pay. That's a relatively small chunk of change because they don't ask that often. But again, that's another part of the contracts is they do have the ability to request extraordinary pay. But I think if Elise is comfortable and we're talking about at most $100,000, $200,000 difference to include the contracts.
And but we don't want to build a precedent here. I mean, we need to make a decision of how we're going to handle this in the future, because if we're going to if we're gonna do it this way now, we need to do it this way next time. And
I mean, it would be my recommendation if we continue with the contract program that when you sign a contract, you're signing a contract and you know what you're going to get paid for 2 years. And from an administrative standpoint, we would never have to worry about adjusting in the interim, except for extraordinary pay, and if the rates go up in the 2 years, that's the risk the contractor is taking. They're trading it off for certainty of work, right? And certainty of pay. They don't have judges cutting their fee apps. It's just, it's a risk people take, and it's a risk we take. So, but that's in the future, right? So, but if that's not how it's been sold in the present, I don't want to.
All right, well, Susan's got her hand up. Let me recognize her first and then Dorothy.
This is sort of has neither here nor now, but I will say when the rates got cut and we had independent negotiated contracts, we cut the rates. We do have some history of rising and falling with the tide. If you really want to end the contract system, I think this would be a good start, because people who are under contract, a lot of them are going to go, well, wait a minute. I could make more money because we're paying our hourly people more. Let's just all strike and terminate our contracts, and then you have to go to an hourly system. So there's an incentive problem, I think, if you don't increase their rates or their payments with the hourly rates.
So I think what I would recommend, or where I'm coming down on this, is that if we do this targeted rate increase, we should include the contracts. If that means we can't afford it, we need to look at this column and decide what we're taking back. In the future, if we have contracts, we will address this accordingly. And that the contracts are not of a lengthy enough term. I mean, you could add a 7-year contract and not had a rate increase. We'll just deal with that in the future. But in the short term, I think we do need to include the contracts. And then the issue is, are you all comfortable with spending the full amount of money that would include the contracts, which is somewhat less than this $1.2 million number that's in the memo we presented to you yesterday? And if you are you happy with the way that we've broken it out? And that's kind of, I guess that's where I am.
I'm worried about I'm worried about the precedent, the acquiescence that we're looking at. I understand all of the dynamics of keeping people working on the contracts and things of that sort. But Mary, I agree with you. I mean, when you're under a contract, you're under a contract. And unless there's a clause in the contract that says it's going to be adjusted because X, Y, or Z, that's just the way it is. I mean, that's the way I think about it. Staples, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I would just, I think we've got an interpretation of contracts question going on here, and I would just like to hear from Mario his pitch that there are two issues. One's what people expect, and one's what they contracted for. And I'm wondering what your pitch is, Mario, that the contract actually says your reimbursement will rise with the PAC rate.
Well, no, what it says is that we will reimburse the attorneys if they have over 50 hours for a high-level felony, $10 less than what the PAC rate is. So if you increase the PAC rate, you have to increase the EP that you give to the attorneys accordingly. Traditionally, when we've ever raised the PAC rates, we've always raised the contracts, and we've done it in various forms. We phased them in as they expired. I think when we did it for the first go round, I did all of them at one time, and I just entered them into the system. For me, as the former contract administrator, I can say that the sense is that the contracted attorneys already think they make less than the PAC attorneys. And so this would definitely be that nail in the coffin, because we would be saying we're increasing the PAC rates and we're leaving your contract as is. And most of the attorneys who are doing contract work are also doing court-appointed work. And so they're not going to want to take the contracts. They're not going to want to renew. And it does make it difficult to recruit in the middle of an RFP when I'm telling attorneys, this is what your contract amount is. And yes, I know it's less than what you make hourly, but I still need you to take this contract. So I think if we're going to increase the rates, it should be increased all the way around and not just for PAC.
All right, Dorothy.
I agree that we should look at increasing it all the way around, because I know firsthand what Mario was saying back early on when RFPs were done, and I actually received a couple of those contracts. The other question I have, though, is, and this is the part I don't remember, is you do have some that have multiple contracts. So are all of those, well, and here's my question. Are they the folks who do the RFPs for the different types of cases? Do they do multiple contracts, or is it one contract to include the rates for everything combined? And the reason why I ask that is that if it is combined, then how do you do an increase for those persons who do have that combined one that may include like one of these targeted areas, but not the other areas? You get what I'm saying? Or is it separated out in some way?
So it's one, so for the RFP contracts, it's one contract with the various case types. And so what we would do is, if we increase the high level and not the misdemeanor and low level, I just increase the high level rate. And so that target increases, which increases the overall target amount for the contract, but we don't touch the misdemeanor or the low level or juvenile or parent amount.
Okay.
Well, Brian, do you have your hand up? You got to unmute.
There we go. Sorry about that. We all remember that the PAC rates went down. So under the contract that we're talking about with contract attorneys, if one is true, that if the rates go up, then contract attorney rates should go up. Would the inverse be true? If PAC rates went down, would we then go to these contracts? And I just wanted to put that out there, not because I have a position on it, but just to kind of foster discussion with regards to that.
Mary, may I say something?
Yeah.
One, I think that that predates many of us on this call, Brian, but what Susan Brooks alluded to earlier is that in 2010, when we were forced to cut the rates, we did amend some of our individually negotiated contracts.
Okay. Well,
at the time, we didn't have the large RFP contracts.
Okay. Well, then that tells me that if they suffer to the downside, they need to participate on the upside.
And I think that makes sense. And so this is the only thing I'm going to say, and then defer to the commission and the chair, is that we went from one place where we were discussing targeted rates yesterday afternoon to another place today in the span of 18 hours. IDS currently has some serious staffing issues that make me, at least as the deputy director, very nervous about making this decision, having only had it on the plate for about 18 hours. And what I would ask, and I will defer to Mary as the executive director, but whether we can consider giving a little bit of time to the budget committee to review this and to give staff an opportunity to consider what the administrative burden would be of adding the contracts in right now.
Well, we are in between contracts administrators, but I think that's kind of not relevant to the overall decision about what we can afford to do and whether we should do it. I don't think that
I just worry about our ability to do it well right now, honestly.
We're going to get that done. I'm not concerned about that if that's what the decision is. I'm still, I understand the RFP contracts. I'm not sure that they do have that downside. I do have one other thing, and I think Elisa put it in the chat, that maybe mitigates toward including the contractors, which is that you've got a whole bunch of people whose contracts would have expired in June, so they would have had the option to renew at a higher rate, right, or to get out of the business. But they have been extended because we extended because of COVID. And so it's just, that again is that human cost of it. So I'll leave it on the table. But as the executive director, I am comfortable that if the decision is made by this commission to include the contracts, we will get that work done.
I think Art has made a motion, and I second that motion.
Okay, Art, are you making a motion orally now? All right, and that motion's been seconded by Staples. Do we have any further discussion about the motion at this time? The motion is, Art, am I correct in saying I'm making a motion to increase the rates to include the contractors with the caveat that we are to look at the contract language when they are renewed? Is that correct? All right, that's Art's motion. Is that the one you seconded, Staples? All right. Any further discussion on that motion at this point in time? All right. If there's no further discussion, all in favor, vote yes in your participant box. All opposed, vote no.
I think it's actually the reactions tab at the bottom of the screen is where you get that.
Well, mine's in the participants thing, so I don't know. It's whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's in participants under more, I think.
All right. Has everybody had a chance to vote? Brian? You have problems with yours. Are you voting yes, Brian?
Yeah, I voted yes.
All right. Is that, I think that's everyone. Judge Crosswhite?
I have 8 yes right now, Darren.
All right. I think Judge Crosswhite might be the only one we're not seeing.
No, that's fine. I don't know if I got it to work right or not, but you can put me down as a yes vote.
All right. It carries. The motion carries. So we'll go ahead and begin those that increase now.
Thank you all. I think it's really important to get that money out there. I really do. I really do. It's not enough, but it's a step. It's a step. Okay.
All right. Now, before we move on, I want to recognize Judge Crosswhite has joined us. He had court this morning. Judge Crosswhite, if you just introduce yourself and tell us who appointed you to the commission for everyone.
Hey, Darren, I'm sorry, you're a little bit weak. Could you repeat the last part of what you said, please?
Just tell us who appointed you to the commission, please.
Who I've appointed what now?
To the commission.
Who I have appointed?
No, who appointed you to the commission?
Oh, I was recommended by Bob Irvin and appointed by the Chief Justice.
And Judge Crosswhite is a Superior Court judge out of Iredell County. And then Stacy Rebane, will you introduce yourself, please, ma'am?
Hi, everyone. This is Stacy Rebane from Winston-Salem. I'm in private practice. Good to see everyone.
All right. Thank you, Stacy. And I want to recognize I made an error and was pointed out that there are also reports from the Chief Public Defenders, Laura Powell, who's Chief Public Defender in McDowell and Rutherford. We also have joined from the Public Defenders, the Chiefs Cindy Black, Dawn Braxton, Sam Sneed, and also I think Bert Kemp has joined us also. So we welcome you guys. Does anyone have any questions of the Public Defenders?
Darren, I just like to point out that I was appointed by the Public Defenders, and it's an honor to receive that appointment.
Yeah, and thank you for your work with that. I know Staples tries to make all of their chief meetings and at least act as a liaison to the commission for the Chief Public Defenders who do such a good job.
Those meetings, which were organized by Susan Brooks, have been remarkable, actually. You know, it used to be the PDs, I think, got together quarterly, drove to Raleigh, blah, blah, blah. And these things, these Zoom meetings are very functional. It's a great exchange of information and mutual support. And, you know, these folks really are performing magnificently under just awful circumstances.
Thank you. Mary, you want to talk about the legislative session quickly?
Yeah, I'm going to be very quick because we need to get into executive session, but you know, the legislative agenda is going to be primarily look like the expansion request submitted to OSBM that Elisa talked to you about earlier, or that we're submitting to OSBM. That process was a great, even though as Elisa says, it's the governor's budget and that's not necessarily what we get. Obviously we get what the legislature gives us. It was a great opportunity to think about policy and where we need to go and where we need to be focused on the resources that we have. So more money for PAC and positions for the offices, however we can get them, OAD and OCD. That's first and foremost. We are working on updating the other legislative priorities that the commission, that IDS has listed in past sessions that the commission has approved, and we will get that to you, and we'll get it to the legislative committee. I don't think there's anything controversial on there. We're looking at the scope of the NCPLS expansion request and what we might seek for them. There are a bunch of non-controversial things like defense access to CJ leads and clarifying appointment in the SBM cases and clarifying counties' responsibilities in funding PD offices and all that good stuff. So it's yeah, nothing controversial, nothing terribly different than what you all have seen in past years. The last thing I wanted to mention on the legislative priorities, in case you all wanted to push back in any respect, is that we do have the three very active communities pushing for public defender expansion in Cleveland and Lincoln counties, and New Hanover to Pender, and then splitting District 1 and 2 so that poor Tommy doesn't have to cover how many thousand square miles. And this is that we ought to support any efforts that that are made for an independent standalone bill that might get those offices moving sooner rather than later. So that's kind of said my piece on the legislative session. If anybody has any questions or suggestions or would like to discuss anything, now's the time before we go into executive session.
All right, any questions about that? I just want to say how pleased I am with the sort of planning that Mary and her staff are starting to do. I think she's calling it the 8-year plan. I think it's something that we're going to be able to go to the legislature with, and they're going to go, wow, these guys thought about this, not just for the next year, but they thought about it for a way down. You know, I think it's going to be a great approach to this legislature that we have, and hopefully it'll work. I don't know that, you know, I don't know whether it's been done before by past executive directors, but we'll see. The commission business, the update on the work and diversity. I think, Sarah, are you still on? Sarah Olson? Need to unmute yourself probably.
Are you talking about the diversity?
Yes.
Committee? I can handle it too. I think she is on. She was.
It's whatever.
Yeah.
Whoever wants to arm wrestle for it.
So our diversity, I'll handle it. Our diversity committee has been meeting. As you all know, we submitted to you all the diversity statement. You all have approved that. We've gotten that handled, and we just created the diversity plan with goals and strategies. And so that is now sitting with our committee. And so we're going to convene and finalize that. And soon you all will be getting that full diversity statement and plan that we hope, we look forward to implementing and having placed everywhere on all our social media platforms and all the materials, including, we included goals of increasing diversity and inclusion in CLEs and training, as well as just the leadership amongst IDS staff and public defender offices and recruitment and training and education and all of that across the board. So just quickly, I appreciate this time. It has been really good work for us to do this with this committee. We are really excited about what we're doing, and I look forward to us being able to implement this and us move forward in the most positive way and have some great outcomes to come from it. And Kate, you will be happy to know one of the goals and strategies that's included is all about data. So we also included in there having us getting the data, collecting the data, and making sure we're real transparent about that across the board with our public, as well as our actors, you know, the staff and everyone in the public defender's office.
All right, thanks, Dorothy. Does anybody have any questions of Dorothy? All right. The fee deadline waiver request, I was trying to get through here. Mary, do you want to handle that, or Whitney?
I'm going to defer to Whitney since she's the one who actually did all the work on that. It just has my name. And I agree, and it's all correct. And
sorry, I was actually communicating about breakout rooms. Sometimes this electronic meeting is not easier than in-person meetings, apparently. Yes, we submitted, I believe, 4 fee applications to you for your review. 3 of the 4 require the commission to make the decision because they were submitted outside of the time period within which the executive director can act. The 4th one we included because it was from the same attorney. The reasoning behind the request was the same, and it just seemed efficient to include it and allow you guys to make the decision. I think that, you know, Mary and I worked on the memo together, and it outlines the justification or the reasons the attorneys have asked for the requests. The only thing I will add to what's included in the memo is that standing alone, while their reasoning might not be enough in a typical year, I do think, as Mary has pointed out correctly during this meeting, there's a human side to things this year, and COVID-19 and its impact on the way people are able to run their offices is part of that human side of the calculation. And so, I mean, while in years past, the commission might not have agreed that these justifications merit an award of any kind, I think this year that Mary has decided, and I agree with her, that they are entitled, or they should be considered for some award of compensation in these cases.
they're still taking a pretty good hit here, 30%. which is a pretty good hit. And bear in mind that, you know, these are people we want to encourage to continue doing the work. One of them is from Raymond Tarleton, who I know does not have to work for IDS rates if he doesn't want to.
So we have a staff recommendation that we accept these requests. Do I have a motion on the floor to adopt the staff recommendation?
I make such a motion to adapt staff recommendations.
Do I have a second for that?
I'll second that.
All right, second, Kate.
Kate.
All in favor vote yes. All opposed vote no. Brian, are you voting?
We have 9 yeses.
All right, I think that's everybody, isn't it? That's on the call. All right. So that motion carries. So that is all of the commission business. I wanted to just point out one thing that I don't know how many of you know Allison Grime, but Allison is being sworn in at this very moment, 12 noon, as the new resident Superior Court judge in Orange and, is it Chatham or Orange and Chatham County? So I want to congratulate Allison. I had the good fortune of being able to write a letter on her behalf because I think she has a broad base of experience, even though she went to the dark side for a little while and prosecuted, but her experience is just extraordinary. I want to congratulate her and wish her well. Also, John Rubin and I were multitasking, and I was telling him that I just got across the waiver that Hank Aaron died. And that is a real sad thing for baseball fans. What a great, he was just a great guy. Not only a great baseball player, but a great ambassador for persons of color who played baseball. So anyway, that's my sad news today. All right. At this point in time, I would entertain a motion under North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A for this commission to go into closed session to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or conditions of initial employment by an individual. Also, we're going into executive session for the opportunity to, I think under A3, is to consult with our counsel. Do I have a motion that we go into executive session under those 2 subsections?
So move.
I have a second. Art, a second. All in favor say aye or vote yes. Aye.
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 We are going into executive session, and I will let, I guess, Jessica and Whitney are going to be knocking people out.
Sending you right now.
Hey. Jessica, I'm showing that I'm in the main session.
Yeah, it looked like we were going and then we got kicked back to the main.
Right.
That's right.
Same with me.
Okay, let me, well, oh yeah, what happened there? There we go. Okay. Are you supposed to be in the main session, also in the breakout session as well, Mr. Bueller? Okay, let me get you sent over there.
excuse me, this is Dolly. I have a question. Will you all be able to bring us back when they finish their executive session? Or should we try to log in later?
If you're trying to log in later, yes, I can let you back in just like when you came in originally. I don't know what time they'll finish with their session though.
Okay, we'll just play around with it. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Bye. Bye.